Unbossed. Unapologetic. Unscripted. The Tesla and Figaro Show. AM KTLV 1220. Listen live at TeslaandFigaro.com.
TeslaandFigaro.com. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is June 17, 2015, 5:30 Central Standard Time, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. For my East Coast listeners, tonight I am really excited. For those of you who don't know, I had an opportunity to interview Dr. Umar Johnson on June 9th. You can hear that replay on www.TeslaandFigaro.com. Had 2 hours with Dr. Johnson, and people are still tagging that interview. They are on YouTube, commenting on the video, on SoundCloud, on Twitter, everywhere. Had a very, very provocative interview with Dr. Johnson. Certainly appreciate the opportunity he gave me to go in an extended conversation where we covered everything from black organizations such as the NAACP, what he's trying to do with his school, as well as his trip here, his debut in Oklahoma City, which will be June 25th on next Thursday. Doors open at 5 o'clock next week, where Dr. Johnson will be giving his lecture on the academic Holocaust against black boys. It is a book release and a power lecture. If you're not familiar with Dr. Johnson, certainly Google him. He is everywhere. And this night we're doing part 2, but it will not be focused on all of the details that we went into on last week for those who were very interested in that show. This week, we really want to hone in on why he's coming to Oklahoma City. What is his intent and purpose of being here at the Spring Lake campus on next week? This is a quick show. It's only 30 minutes in and out. So we want to give him an opportunity to have that. Our number here is 405-672-1220. Again, it's 405-672-1220. I'm going to welcome Dr. Johnson again to the show. How are you?
Good afternoon, Queen. Thanks for having me back on the show. Looking forward to getting to Oklahoma City next Thursday. I guess we only got about 7-8 days to go now.
Yes, we do. And Dr. Johnson, I've told it that's been the best show that I've ever had. And so I thank you for participating in that, because the dialogue was so rich and you covered so many different areas, and listeners had a chance to hear you all over the country. And so tonight, like I just mentioned, really want to talk about, the importance of the school, why you're coming to Oklahoma City, a lot of different regions who may not normally hear this type of dialogue, Oklahoma City being one. Why was Oklahoma City important to you in your tour dates?
2 reasons. Number one, I get a lot of support mail. I don't like to say fan mail because I'm not an entertainer. I get a lot of support mail, and I'm regularly asked, and I've been regularly asked for the last 5 years or so, why I haven't been to certain cities. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma City is one of them. That's a city that I've regularly been asked about. When I was in Tulsa, I was asked about Oklahoma City. I believe when I was in Denver, I was asked about it, and in other places. And so what I tried to do, one of my New Year's resolutions in 2015, was to get to cities I hadn't been before. So last week, I was in Charleston. Today, I'm in Birmingham. I'll be speaking in Birmingham, Alabama tomorrow. My first time here, my first time in Oklahoma City, and then my first time in San Antonio. I'm really trying to hit a lot of uncharted territory this year, because everybody deserves to get that information and that inspiration.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about building the school, because I want you to talk about that and the importance, but let me ask you this, since this is kind of a part 2, how long are you projecting that this project should be complete? Is there a time limit, deadline that you set?
Yes, mm-hmm. New Year's Day.
By New Year's Day.
I'm only giving myself to New Year's Day. The fundraiser went from May 20th, 2014 to May 20th of 2015, equal 1 year. Of course, the fundraiser is still going on, so you're looking at about 14 months or so. The bottom line is a war against black boys. They're being marginalized, they're being exterminated, they're being oppressed, miseducated, medicated, juvenile incarcerated, and everything else you can think of. I can't keep waiting. So what I'm doing is I'm going to give people till New Year's Day. And at New Year's Day, I'm going to look at what I've raised, and I'm going to make a decision whether I'm going to stay in America or whether I'm going to take the money to Africa and build the school there. As I expressed during the last interview, possibly. My only concern about going to Africa, although I would love to do that, I'm a Pan-Africanist, A lot of parents here have been so conditioned by America's mainstream media with negative imagery about Africa that they wouldn't feel comfortable sending their sons there. And so although they would be allowed to come, how many African-American parents would actually send their sons there? Now, the argument can be made, what does it matter? If you're a Pan-Africanist, I'm sure your school will be filled up with African boys from all across the world, even if there are none represented from America. But I have a special stake and a special commitment and a special responsibility to our young brothers here in the States. And I don't know if I could live with myself if I left them, because I don't know who else is going to fill this void that I currently occupy. So I'm saying that to say that if we don't have enough money for a residential school by New Year's Day, I'm going to have to go ahead and get a traditional school. And as the old adage goes, I may have to crawl before I can walk.
And that school you're talking about would be in Africa, or would you do something smaller here, a smaller project?
Well, that's the decision I would have to make. If I go to Africa, I can build a residential school. Okay. We have over $300,000, probably close to $400,000 now. That's $4 million. You're talking from $3 to $4 million in African currency. I have enough money to build a school in Africa right now. Okay. And when I go to Ghana next month, I'm going to be speaking with one of the kings there, one of the traditional rulers, to talk about doing just that. But again, I don't want to abandon our little brothers over here, so I may just have to bite the bullet, stay in America, and get a regular traditional, 8 to 3 school, which is not what I want to do. My vision and my paradigm is residential education.
Because again, I think what you're doing is, and I certainly understand what you're saying, with that would be an option too, but you're also trying to change culture as a whole. And so that's the importance of having this type of school in America, not just the children that are attending that school, but the social consciousness that you're trying to bring around the community that the school would be in, the parents that are involved, and hopefully their friends and family. Is that accurate?
Yes, very much accurate. Very much accurate. That school would be what the church used to be, which is the center of progressive development, stimulation, and organization for the black community. That power, from the black church of yesteryear would be felt in every avenue of human endeavor: economics, politics, family, culture, so forth. And that's how the school would be. The Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy would be that psychological and economic and political and cultural stimulus package in the neighborhood where it would be at.
And so, and let me ask you that when we talk about what the black church used to be, because that you and I were on the same page with that. And I want to ask you, I know the school is your primary focus, but Dr. Johnson, so many people are thirsty for the knowledge that you have, and they are craving. I went to see a Black Panther premiere movie on last week, and watching that movie and seeing, what that consciousness that we had during that time, and the divide between what you talked about, the bougie black folks and the people that were forgotten about on the street, and how those individuals gravitated towards the Black Panther Party. There is such a gap in that. And so I want to know, will you expand what you're doing beyond the school and being possibly that voice? I know that's your career, that's what you're committed to, but who's going to fill the gap to expand this further than just education?
Right. Well, education is just the foundation. It's the beginning. Without question, wherever I end up, I would look to be a secular leader in the community as well as an educational leader. You look at Booker T. Washington, you look at Mary McLeod Bethune, these great ancestors, they were the founders and presidents of colleges, but at the same time, they participated in leadership activity in the community. In addition to Tuskegee Institute, Booker T. Washington had the National Negro Business League. So, I could never just be an educator. I never could just be a psychologist. Our situation demands that all of us are multimodal, multi-systemic, that we all multitask. We don't have the luxury of just doing one thing. So to answer the question, without question, yes, ma'am, my work would have to consume far more than just educating our children.
And I'm not going to go into any negative, because this is your time, for you to talk about what you're coming here. But I do want to ask one question as far as being, since you mentioned a psychologist. You are a degree psychologist, correct?
Yes, ma'am. My doctorate is in clinical psychology,
okay,
and I am a certified school psychologist. In order to become a licensed psychologist. I would need a licensed clinical psychologist. So I have my doctorate in clinical psychology.
Okay.
So just like with med school, once you get your doctorate, you're not done if you plan to practice privately. So if I want to do clinical psychology privately, I have to do an internship, a postdoc intern, which basically means I need to find a psychologist under whom, someone who's already licensed, under whom I can work for approximately a year. It's normally about 1,500 hours, and then I take the state licensure examination. But as a school psychologist, I'm already certified and credentialed and practicing privately. So I'm saying all that to say that because 99.9% of my work is with children and 99.9% of my work is school psychology, technically I don't need the license. I don't need the license because school psychologists can practice independently. So that's the reason why I haven't gone after it, because in many respects it's like, what's the use? My work is in the schools, my work is with children, and I'm already credentialed for that. I don't need that license. The license would only benefit me if I wanted to do private therapy with adults and bill their medical insurance.
Okay.
Private therapy with adults and bill their medical insurance. That's the only way that would benefit me. But because I'm so child-centered, if I got that license, I probably would never use it because my name, my reputation, my love, my work is school psychology, and I'm already certified in that.
Right. And so, because I didn't want to think that the school, because I looked it up and it had you listed as a psychologist, so I would assume that the school district will require some type of credential.
Well, we've been there.
Right.
I don't even deal with that anymore because
Right.
I've been there and done that a million times as far as the accusations about me not having credentials. What judge, what lawyer, what superintendent, what school district is going to have you coming in, working, testing, evaluate, especially someone whose views are as unorthodox as my own? Do you really think they're not going to check me? When I speak at colleges, do you not know they do a background check?
Right.
I have to give them my credentials.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
some stuff is just like, come on, it's
Right.
common sense.
It's right, and I said I would ask because hey, I'm going to ask the questions. All the rest of the drama unnecessary. I appreciate all the things that you have addressed with your followers. I do believe in transparency, and I think you've done that on a number of different issues because I've been reading and following as well, and I just I think what you stand for is important, but I also think you have addressed the issues that are out there. Addressing them repeatedly is not necessary. Multiple times.
I've spoken on my education definitely more than any other scholar has had to. And the sad thing about it is I'm not being questioned about it by white folks. They know my credentials because if you work at a university, there's a database that you tap into where you can verify anybody as being a fraud. That's how they catch people who are fraudulent because it's just a matter of doing a check. And a lot of times they don't do that check. But with somebody like me, obviously, who's not in the mainstream, who's considered quote unquote controversial, they're going to check me out. In fact, I was investigated. Black people had contacted the Pennsylvania Board of Psychology. They also contacted the National Association of School Psychology. And what happened was I was called by both. I had to go to a hearing for the Pennsylvania Board of Psychology because black people were questioning my credentials. And what was so embarrassing about it is that these white people are looking at me like, we thought you were one of the people that was fighting. Why would your people be coming to us? Why would black people be going to white people to try to get you destroyed?
Right.
And that's one of the embarrassing things that I've had to deal with. And that was last year when I had to go to the hearing because someone made a complaint that I was not credentialed. Obviously, that was one and done because they have access to a database to look it up. So it was never really an issue with white folk, as I said, because they have access to all the databases they need in order to look up the information. But it's just a shame that black people do that. I chose not to renew my national certification in school psychology about a year ago because it's a professional association. And for the record, you do not have to have your national credential to practice. It's only a professional credential, nothing more. And I held it for a long time. And I'm paying dues to be a part of this national group, the National Association of School Psychologists, and they're not doing nothing about the special ed war against black boys. They're doing nothing about the psychiatric drugs. They're doing nothing about the ADHD. And I'm saying to myself, why am I belonging to a white racist professional group that's charging me dues every year and doing nothing for our boys? So I made a conscientious decision not to renew. And they still send me the emails now. Even now, they send me the emails, you should consider renewing your credential For what? What are y'all doing for black boys?
Right.
But the thing about it, Queen, was when I gave up that credential, Negroes thought I never had it.
Right.
So they called the National Association. And remember, I'm getting all this because they called me to tell me. They said, we've had about 10 calls from black people. Everybody was black, not a single white person.
Right.
Asking us whether or not you ever held a credential. And we told them, yes, you held a credential, and you simply chose not to renew it. And they said, we don't know what's going on with you and your community, but we find it odd that somebody in your position who we thought was a leader of his people would actually have so many of his own people coming to us to try to find fault with you.
And don't
you know
we get that out?
That is to hear from a white person.
Yeah, it's very embarrassing. Well, we hear it all the time. I mean, again, and I know you're a busy man, but I certainly love to send you the link, the quick little. We had a question and answer after the Black Panther Party movie, and it was more white people in the room than black, which is not surprising because there's always been a lot of white people involved in any civil rights issue or, anything like that, whether it's curiosity or wanting to understand more or, whatever the reasons. And it was, again, the black people in the room. When I posed the questions, it was the black people in the room that were irritated about me saying, one of the sisters who was the moderator said, well, it's not Black Lives Matter. It's not just Black Lives Matter. It's all lives matter. And I asked her the question, why is it even in a room of a Black Panther movie where the white people are clearly comfortable being in a discussion about black people, you still change the conversation. It's always us. And I referred to you. I said, Dr. Johnson just talking about it's always us that's always trying to patronize and make everybody else feel comfortable about our issues when they're okay with it. It's us. And people clapped in the room when I said your name. It was a couple of people that were there that said, oh, yeah, I know he's coming. And there was one gentleman that said, well, I don't know if he's still going to come next week. And that was the same one that was challenging me and who was on the tape that said, well, I want to thank the white people for coming. And it's not a black issue. It's not a white issue. It's a human issue. And so,
God.
Right. And so they asked about the parallels from the Black Panther Party movement and the parallels now. It's not just the police brutality that's a parallel, but there's also a divide, like we talked about when we ended the show. There's a divide between revolutionary black people versus black people who just want to go along to get along. And that is a very similar parallel when you look at how the FBI infiltrated the Black Panther Party. Yes, there's that part, but the reason why they're able to pick it apart is because you had two different movements. One with Huey Newton wanting to focus more on the social program versus Cleveland, who wanted to focus on the whole pillar, everything that we address, not just a breakfast, but also all of the things that we're looking for: education, fair housing, police brutality. So that shift is what I've learned from talking with you, having that very long 2-hour interview and then watching that movie is why I'm asking you, can you fill in that gap? Is there something else? And I know you have a lot on your plate, but I'm looking at the response, Dr. Johnson, and I know you get it everywhere. You are so needed. So whatever happens with the school or whatever decision you make, I'm praying that you decide to stay in America to continue to do your work, not just in education, but to be that voice, because we truly, truly don't have one.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I was just having this conversation the other day in Charleston with some Pan-Africanists, because some of them are like, Doc, just go to Africa. But I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, it just took me back to Malcolm X and it took me back to Frederick Douglass. And when Frederick Douglass was over in England, when he had to get out of the country because the slave master had the slave trackers looking for him to snatch him back, they paid for his freedom over in England. And they told him, you should just stay here, be a leader here in England, and send for your family, and y'all can come here. You don't have to put up with that racism anymore. And Frederick said, I might be free, but my people still are not. I have to go back. Mm-hmm. And he went back and fought, until slavery fell. And I look at Malcolm X, when he was in Africa, they told him to stay there. In West Africa, they said, send for Betty and the girls, stay here. Don't go back to America. Your life is being threatened not only by your former associates, but also the government wants you dead. Stay here, Malcolm. And Malcolm said the same thing. I cannot. My fight is for my people back home. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I feel I'm going to have to continue in that same vein because I don't see somebody else stepping up. So, I really feel that I may have to stay. And to be honest with you, I think by the end of the summer, I really see myself not being in Philadelphia because, I have not yet ever entrenched myself in a community where I can really begin to put the institutions and processes and systems in place. Well, in Philadelphia for a time I did, but having been there for 40 years, all my life, I see the need to get out. I was in Charleston last week. I really enjoyed the energy there.
Oh, I know you
Baltimore
did.
is another place that I was looking at. Chicago and Detroit, obviously, because of the love I get, but these other places are smaller. And the smaller the community, the more manageable it is in terms of organizing black folk. And when I come to Oklahoma City next week, I'm also going to be studying because I think by the end of the summer, I'll be moving to one of these small cities to really get some work done before the school gets here.
Well, shout out to Charleston, South Carolina. Dub Slim, my producer out there, he shared your message. He listened to it and shared it. He is a lot of people think because he's a producer and works with rappers that he's automatically a Democrat. He's actually very fiscal against stereotypes that people think he is, and he loved your message. And I hosted an event there, and I can tell you, I'm sure they welcomed you. For those who are listening, Dr. Johnson will be again here next week on June 25th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Spring Lake campus. We'll be doing a power lecture that goes into more detail of what he's talking about now, to actually talk about the book, do a lecture, and then explain everything else that you have lined up. Because even Mr. Pruitt said he signed up for one of your leadership classes. So maybe you turned him around a little bit, Dr. Johnson. But he said he signed up and wanted to attend the leadership workshop. So tell us, since we only have about 7 minutes left, what all can people expect on next Thursday?
Well, number one, they can expect the truth. Number two, they can expect to be fully educated about how the miseducation machine works, and more specifically, what they can do about it. My lecture isn't going to be much different than the one I give to lawyers and school personnel. This is how I trained them in the school system, so they're actually going to get the training I give to professionals in the system. So by the time we're done there on Thursday, our parents in Oklahoma City and across Oklahoma, because I heard a lot of people coming from around the state, they'll really be in a good position to be able to advocate for their children. We're going to sign folks up for the National Independent Black Parent Association. And we also want your listeners to know that the Black Boy College Tour registration just went up today. So they can go to drumarjohnson.com, click on Eventbrite, or go straight to Eventbrite at princeofpanafricanism.eventbrite.com, and they can register their son for the Black Boy College Tour as well. But we're going to talk about the political economy, black male-female relationships, the police extermination and terrorism campaign against black males. We will talk about Pan-Africanism, the decline of black leadership since the Dr. King assassination, and so much, much more. My lectures are a buffet. I don't think there's a stone that I leave unturned. Our problems are multi-systemic, and so the solutions also have to be multi-systemic. So although education is the focus, we're going to end up dealing with everything in addition to that.
And I encourage everyone to get your tickets early. People keep asking, can they show up at the door? And matter of fact, when I mentioned you at the Black Panther movie, a young activist said that he went to Tulsa to see you and how he had traveled down to see you and was excited about coming to this event again. So you said it only holds a couple of hundred people where you're going?
Yeah, I think it's 300 or 350. And Sister Fowler, my sister, she said that the college is a real stickler for the capacity. So we're asking people, please get your tickets ahead of time, especially if you're coming from out of town. Do not gamble with being able to get in at the door, because we may very well sell out before the doors open. If for whatever reason you cannot get the ticket online, you need to be there on time when the doors open and make sure you're one of the first to get in. But with 350, if we don't sell out, I'm sure we probably will be by the first hour. So folks should try their best to get the ticket ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. How can people help you with the movement? I know they can donate to the school, but so many people have asked, what can they do? You talked about opening up chapters. Are different, I guess, chapters, of the Parent Association.
They can help with that. Mm-hmm. Anybody who wants to start a chapter should contact me through my website, drumarjohnson.com. Send me an email, drumarjohnson@yahoo.com, so we can get the Parent Association cracking. Because to be honest, we've never had that. We've never had a movement of black parents, and it's time for that.
Mm-hmm. And so in addition, what about the people who do not have parents? Should they just follow your messages on YouTube, come see you speak? I just feel there's so many people that want to do something. They gravitate
well,
towards
you don't have to have a child to be a part of the Parent Association. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing we want to let everybody know. We need all of our people, because the children belong to all of us. In African culture, children belong to the community. They come through the parents, but they belong to the community. And when you talk about a Parent Association, you're talking about not only helping our parents, but saving our children, which is saving our future. So we need every hand on board with the Parent Association, whether they have children or not. And pretty soon I'll be ready to roll out the Pan-African Credit Union. We need those credit unions. I'm working on getting the information to lay down the Pan-African Credit Union, and that'll be another area where people can help. And we're going to be looking for everyone to put all their savings money into that credit union so we can have the working capital needed to build the institutions that we need to resurrect ourselves.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate your time. And I want to be clear because I've had about 10, 15 different texts of people wanting to call in, and they think it's probably you saying one of your critics said, well, that must have been him. Let me be clear. It was me that said that we're not taking calls tonight. We only had 30 minutes. We gave the 2 hours, 2.5 hours for callers to call in. I appreciate you, Dr. Johnson, taking those calls. I love to be clear and transparent. Even that night, you were not expecting the NAACP to be on the line or take those calls. So I appreciate, and I apologize for not being clear, that was how the format was going to go. But I am certainly grateful, that you took the time to take those calls and not run from, any type of dialogue.
Right.
And you were, in fact, during the show, you were encouraging, saying, let's take another call, sis, let's take another call. So it certainly wasn't Dr. Johnson that said not take calls. I did, because I knew how fast the show would go, and I did want, our intent is to focus on next week. And so that was initially why you and I connected, but I really am appreciative for the 2 hours that you did give me, because it did open up some serious dialogue that is still going on right now on Facebook and Twitter, off of the comment, and YouTube, off of the comments that you said. And so you certainly have sparked the consciousness of a lot of people. I've got some screenshots that I'm going to send over to your representative that I've been working with here, where people have been donating, people have been going on your page, they've been reading more about you. So please know that 2 hours was certainly not in vain. You have awoke a lot of people, or at least the small group of people that I engage with that follow you, and some who have not known about you. So what you're doing is important, and I want to encourage everyone next week in Oklahoma City to come to see Dr. Johnson in person, to ask the questions, to hear what he has to say. Again, Thursday, June 25th at the Spring Lake campus. Come early. The website again, Dr. Johnson, on Eventbrite?
DrUmarJohnson.com, or they can go straight to Eventbrite at Prince of Pan-Africanism with a K, .eventbrite.com. Also wanted your listeners to know that they can download the Dr. Umar Johnson cell phone app at Google Play Store. So get the new cell phone app. But yes, DrUmarJohnson.com.
Be careful, get some rest, take care of yourself. I know health is important. Please arrive safely. I look forward to you coming to the city, look forward to meeting you personally, look forward to following your journey. Anytime there's something I can do, Dr. Johnson, I've reached out and told your representative that I want to help continue your movement. We don't have black media that addresses our issues as we should. Most of us are paid, and that's why my show says unbought, unbossed, and unscripted. So anytime there's a message you want to get out, please give me the honor and privilege to help you do that, because it does go a long way. A lot of people may not listen live, but when they send that out and keep sending that MP3 and MP3, I mean, it just goes on and on. It's never ending. So please let me be a vessel for you in that regard.
Will do, Queen. Thank you so much. You really helped us get the word out about this event. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Everyone, you've been listening to Dr. Umar Johnson, the one and only, who took out time. He will be here next week in Oklahoma City, Spring Lake campus, June 25th. You can get more information. If you want to hear the replay of Dr. Johnson's heavy debate with the NAACP that we had, a 2-hour debate, you can Google www.teslanfigaro.com to hear that rewind. And I will also upload this show so you can share it with your friends. I'll see you next week, Thursday, because I'll be also covering that event and writing an article about it so that you can see the feedback that we got from the city. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I will see you next week.
TeslanFigaro.com